Hello and welcome. This is the Senior Estate Concierge Show, and I am here today with Joycelyn Urech, and we're going to be talking about elder law. We're going to learn so much that we feel we're going to be excited to help our neighbors, our families, and our loved ones. Because when we have the knowledge, we have the power. Right, Joycelyn?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have the power. Well, I'm so glad you could join us today. This is a thrill for me because as we get older, we do realize that there are certain things that are out of our control, and that doesn't make us feel good. So if we can have a friendly face like yours, helping us guide us through the legal system when it comes to our elder population, whether it's a family member, whether it's us, whether it's a neighbor or someone at work. You know, everybody knows somebody that has a legal issue or question when it comes to the law and elder care attorneys or elder care situations. That's the word.
Right.
So thank you for joining us today. If you are watching us live, did you know that you could ask questions? We're live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. We're live on LinkedIn. There's so many different places that you can go and find us and ask a question live right here. So don't be shy. Ask your questions. I have quite a few questions for you today. So I hope you're ready.
I hope so too.
Well, I want to start off by talking about the Senior Estate Concierge. So, Joycelyn, will you tell us a little bit about your experience? How did you hear about us? How did you get involved? And maybe you have a story to tell.
Oh, yes. Actually, we found out about Senior Estate Concierge very organically, I should say. We went to a networking event and we met a person who is was the director, or I guess regional director of a senior living community. And she was involved and she told us all about it. And we thought, well, let's go and check this out. And so she invited us to a meeting and we went to the meeting and we were very impressed. And the reason we were very impressed was because in that group, there were people from all disciplines who worked together to support seniors. And so if we needed resources, which we often do, we'll have clients that call us, their parents need something, and we would have to find someone to fill that need, whether it was they needed someone to come in and help them bathe, or they needed someone to help them figure out how to get around the house, maybe mobility or those types of things. There were a lot of things that people need when they get older, and we didn't have a direct resource. But in the Senior Estate Concierge, we found a whole group of people who are focused on this. And so we just use our directory and say, call this person, find this person. They're looking for a home or somewhere for their senior parent to go. Here's a list of names that you can call. They can help you find a place. And so it's been very helpful, and we're very delighted to be members.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's how the Senior Estate Concierge got started in the first place. Our founder and director is Bill Graff, and I have his information down scrolling across the screen. He is a specialized real estate agent for seniors and their families. And he went through extra training and he really has a heart for seniors and their families. And so he found out really early on the same story. They need a lot more than just a new house to live in, or they need more information about what are their choices. When you get older, you could move into an assisted living, but what are you going to do with all your stuff? So they have so many different people. Just like you said, we have a directory of people who are members of this group who've all been background checked. And let's face it, we all talk, right? And so if somebody's doing something not supposed to, out they go. They can't be part of our group. So we keep tabs on everybody. We follow up to make sure everybody has what they're looking for. And nobody gets lost in the shuffle that way. So if we need an elder care attorney, we know where to go. If we need a real estate agent, we know where to go. If we need anything that a senior or their family is needing, then we have just the right people. And if we don't, by chance, if we don't have somebody that fits that in our membership, somebody in our membership knows them. So I can always call and say, hey, do you know somebody? And I always get, well, of course I do. So do you have any stories of families that you've helped or a senior that had a special need?
I have a story of that I can share about a senior currently that I'm helping someone with. This person's a dear friend of mine, and she called me. Her mother is 103 years old, and she called me, and her mom is living alone and has fallen a few times. Mom is not wanting to leave her home, and so she was looking for someone who could come in to help. And so I went to that directory and I found someone who can actually go in, get services for her so she can get the help she needs. The only thing that we still have a problem with is the fact that she probably shouldn't be there by herself. Uh-huh. And so we're currently working on trying to get her affairs in order and to understand what her limitations are and to get her services so that someone's coming in to check on her on a regular basis. But that can be very difficult, and you have to be very patient and wait for that person to make those decisions, because even though they may have some cognitive issues, they have not identified them and they haven't been medically identified. And you can't just tell someone this is what you're going to do. She's an adult, and so she gets to make decisions. So I'm currently working with them, and hopefully we'll get some things done. She did have some ideas of what she would like to happen. She wants to stay home, and I find that most seniors these days would like to stay in their homes as long as possible.
You bring up a really big point, and I'm actually going through this right now. What if it's not the best thing for them, but they insist on staying home, and their house is not safe, and they're not safe? Isn't there anything we can do to not force them, but encourage them somehow legally?
Well, legally, you can apply for or have someone come in, maybe get adult protective services to come in, and you may be able to get the guardianship process started. Because at some point, people don't realize that they need help, and so they're not very amenable when you offer it or want to get them to a place that's safer for them. And so if you get them involved, the environment is really not safe. You want to do that. You want to report it and have someone check on them and go in and maybe get with a social worker who can then encourage them and show them why they don't need to be in their home at that point. And that could get the ball rolling. Otherwise, you could have a situation that I have seen where a person was elderly and they fell down in their home and had to be basically rescued out of their home by EMS, and they were taken to the hospital. And oftentimes they will do an evaluation once they get there, and you'll have a social worker who comes in and will say, this person shouldn't be at home alone and can't go back to that environment because it's not safe. And then once you do that, and then it's kind of the hospitals will sort of take over, and they'll say, we're not releasing you till you go home. We're going to release you to a nursing facility. And if you don't find one, we will find one for you. And they will and have power, and they do that. And it's unfortunate, but it does happen. And it's usually in a case where a person is obviously has the diminished cognitive ability. They have fallen down multiple times and have had to be rescued probably more than once, and so that's one thing that can happen. And if you have a loved one who's basically being stubborn about it, unfortunately, there's sometimes not much you can do but wait. Wait until there's an opportunity to get them to transition to a safer environment. And meanwhile, you have to wait and hope that nothing serious happens, and just check on them and have someone there to check on them. So social workers can help, and adult protective services sometimes can step in and help. They're limited on what they can do as well.
I am so glad that we touched on this. It wasn't something that we were going to talk about today, but it just happens to be something that's happening in my life right now. There is a friend of mine who has fallen several times. She's broken her hip. She's, her glasses hit her head, and she's in the hospital right now, and she just wants to go home. She just wants to go home. And I'm like, no, you can't, but I can't really say anything, I can't force her, but.
Right, exactly. And so you need the doctors to say something,
Okay.
If she's not stable, maybe they can give her a device or something. Maybe she needs a walker. Maybe she, needs someone to check on her, but maybe she just needs a walker and she needs to use it. Some people won't use a walker even.
Right. You don't want to look old.
Exactly. But you're inside your house. If you need one, you need one.
Right.
We all need help sometimes. And in that situation, if you don't have a doctor or a social worker who's helping you and encouraging her and saying, no, you can't go back in that environment, then there may not be much that you can do. Falling and breaking a hip, you may never recover from that.
Right. I totally understand that. Well, okay, Joycelyn, now we've talked about what I wanted to know. Do you have anything specific that you would like us to know? Because we don't know what we don't know. And I think it's important for everyone listening and watching that they know something that is important that we haven't thought about.
Well, we were just having that conversation about what to do about people who don't know they need help. And so one of the things that you can do to prepare for that, even for yourself, is to maybe set up something like a trust. You can do a revocable living trust. And what that is it's a I wouldn't say it's a device, but it's a tool that you can use. You can take your assets and put your assets in that. And then you have yourself maybe as the trustee, the person who's going to be managing all of that while you're alive and while you are you have all of your faculties about you. If you lose cognitive ability at some point, and you can set it up so that two doctors would have to say that, then you can have another trustee who would be the backup person who would then take care of your affairs and your assets that are there. You also can use that as a vehicle to transfer your assets once you have passed. So if you've put those in there, you can say that this goes to that person, this goes to that person, and then you don't have to have probate. Even though it's a good idea to still have a will, because oftentimes people will have these revocable living trusts and they put all of what they think are all of their assets in there that need to be transferred that way. All of the probate assets are in there and they forget something. And so then you have this other asset that's out there and you don't have a will. And then it has to pass through the laws of intestacy and may not be going to the people that you want it to go to. So we encourage people to have a will on top of a trust, but trust is a really good vehicle. You can put, you can give instructions on, what you want to have happen if you lose the ability to take care of yourself and your affairs. And you can put your assets in there and you can pass them to your loved ones. That's one type of trust. And then the other type of trust is an irrevocable trust. That trust is even more useful if you have assets enough to support yourself. But maybe if you had to go into a long-term care facility, your assets would be decimated perhaps. And so to avoid that, you can put them in an irrevocable trust. And if you put them in the irrevocable trust and something happens and you need to go into a nursing facility, you could still qualify for Medicaid with an irrevocable trust because it's not considered your assets. If you do that though, you basically have lost control over your assets. You have another trustee that would have to be that someone other than yourself. So a loved one who you trust, maybe a child. If you have a child that you trust who would make sure that you had what you needed, they could use the funds from there to help support you in addition to what other assets you might have. So those two things I think would be very helpful if people included them in their estate plan. Most people prefer the revocable living trust because they still have control while they're alive and while they're able to take care of those things.
Well, I have a question before you move on.
Okay.
Let's say my mother, is getting older and she is, thinking about having a will and things like that. And so I encourage her to come see you. Do you find out what our situation is and then give us your best, advice? Or do we have to come in and just say, we want this?
No. We interview our clients. We talk to them. We try to get to know what their family dynamics are, what assets they have, and what they would like to have their assets, what they want to happen with their assets once they pass on. And so each person is different, and we treat them differently. And so what fits for you may not fit for another person. Some people have a lot, some people have a little. And they also, some people have family dynamics that are difficult and some don't. And so it just depends on what your family dynamics are and what your needs are, what your assets are, and what you hope to achieve. And so we tailor it to that. And that's basically it. Every person's different. Every situation is different. So it's very, very much so an individual type of thing.
You have to be very knowledgeable to be handling all those different scenarios.
Well, you know what? You see a lot of different scenarios. And so we will sometimes, if we have something we haven't seen, we'll sit down and discuss it. And so we'll bring up this person. This is what I have. What would work best? And we also will tell people we can do this or we can do that. So then you ultimately have the choice on how you want. If you do this way, this is what's going to happen. If you do it that way, this will happen. And some people just need a simple will. They come in and they need a will, and because they want to make sure their assets pass the way that they want them to. Another thing we tell people.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say.
I'll ask my question later.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you have a house, let's say, and you have a 401k, and that's all you have that you want to pass on. You have maybe a bank account with some money in it, but it's not a significant amount. There are things that you can do to avoid probate and actually have your home and or your property pass without having to go to court. There are things that you can do. So as far as the 401ks and the IRAs, those things are non-probate assets anyway. They have designated beneficiaries, so you don't even have to worry about those. But essentially, if you have a 401k and a house, all you have really is a house that has to be taken care of.
Okay, all right. There are so many questions rolling around in my head right now.
Okay.
One of them I talked to your partner, Caroline, about. And that is travel. What happens if we're traveling overseas or in another state and we pass? But before we get to that, I want to remind you that if you have a question for any kind of question at all for Joycelyn, please feel free to type it in. If you're watching us, I can see that there's quite a few people watching us on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. Feel free to type it in, and we'll do our best to get that question answered, because I can only ask the questions that I have in my mind, but you may have a totally different situation. So feel free, and we'll get your question answered. And if we don't do it right here on the show, don't you worry. We will make sure that Joycelyn gets that question answered for you.
Definitely.
So, okay, my question is, and we covered this a little bit in the previous episode, what happens when a family member passes and they're in a different country or a different state?
Well, are they visiting that country or that state? I mean, if they're visiting and they have to,
okay, let's say they're visiting. They got a motorhome and they're tootling around.
Right, exactly. But their home. Okay, so their home is still, let's say, still in Texas, and so wherever they are, that situation would have to be handled by those authorities. So that person has passed away, and so whatever their laws say have to happen, but you would have to get the person's body transported back to where you want it to be, and then handle that. But you're talking about what would happen to their estate. Their estate stays the same. It's wherever they call home. Their domicile is where the laws would apply as far as probate is concerned, as far as their trust even is concerned, because trust have a home. It's like, okay, this is a Texas trust. This trust is for Texas. And so everything would be handled in Texas, even though they may be somewhere else.
Okay, that's good to know.
Right.
Because so according to the law, I happen to know this because I researched it. You do have to have a domicile to have a driver's license, to be able to vote. Right. You have to have a home, even if you sold your home and you're tootling around in a motorhome. Right. You still have to have a place where you get your mail and you call home, right?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody has one, even though I have seen people who try to avoid having that. Then there's that very thing, they had a motorhome and they decided they weren't going to have an address, but you have to have one.
You have to
have a place that you call home and where the tax laws would apply to you. So
that's right. You can't get away from it. No, you got to pay your taxes.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, good. So what are some of the other common things that people come to see you for?
Well, okay, so what's the most common thing is that people will come and they'll say, my parents, I don't know what to do. They're declining, are we going to, we need to put them in a facility. We don't know where to go. And they have a house. So, and they don't have a will, and they don't have a power of attorney. Okay. So that's a lot.
Yikes.
Exactly. So, what are we going to do? And so you just have to start at the bottom. You look at the entire thing and you let them know, first of all, okay, they didn't have a will. They often don't have a power of attorney. So there's nothing that you can do with a house or anything like that. You just have to either secure it somehow. But so we may need to start a process of a Medicaid application, perhaps, so that they can afford to go to a facility. Or we have to start looking for a facility who will take them with Medicaid pending. We have to look at their assets and see what it is that they have. What income do they have coming? Is it Social Security, and do they have a pension? Are their assets going to preclude them from qualifying for Medicaid? Is there something we can do to move those assets around or spend some of them so that, making them comfortable, in a legal way that we can help them spend down so that they can qualify? Where are they going to go? And so Senior Estate Concierge comes in really helpful finding a place to go. Okay, so we have people who can help find a place for them to go, but then we have to deal with their assets and trying to get them qualified. And so we would start the process of maybe a Medicaid application once we figure out what the assets are. And oftentimes the kids don't even know what bills they have. They know nothing. And so they will give them a list of things to look for. Go in the house, wait for the mail to come, go through the mail. You have to go through the house. You have to look for everything because their parents probably don't remember where anything is. They may not even be speaking at that time. Sometimes they call us and the parents are actually bedridden and they're not talking and they haven't been for a while. But it's just gotten to the point where no one can take care of them, on a daily basis. There's no one there. So they do try. People really try to keep their parents, their loved ones at home in a place where they feel most secure and safe and where they want to be. So we see that a lot.
So I think what you're telling me is most of the people that come in are the children or the caregivers of the pizza.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because like I was saying before, the 103-year-old woman, she doesn't want to leave her house and she doesn't think she has a problem. And so it's difficult. You can't make someone, leave their home and tell them, I'm sorry, it's not safe for you. What are you going to do? Call the police and have them arrested? You can't do that. So it's difficult. It's difficult for families. And so,
It does. There's so many different things that can happen. I remember my grandmother refused to give up her car, and she ended up running over a gentleman on a motorcycle, and he was paralyzed from the waist down, from the waist down. And I thought, doggone it, too bad we can't force them to do the right thing, but it's just hard. That's why I said, isn't there a legal way that we can maybe handle some of these things?
Well, with something like that, that after you reach a certain age, I think you have to go. I'm not sure if it's annually for a driver's license and that type of thing, but all they do is check your eyesight. And so I agree, something does need to be done. There is an organization that will help you if your parents are getting to that age where they don't need to drive, where they go in and they actually work with that person to show them why they don't need to be driving. I don't know exactly what she does, but it sounds like a really good service. It's a service for families to help that loved one give those keys.
That's wonderful. And you're just a wealth of knowledge. So I can see why people you would be the first person they would call, because you know what people need.
Right.
Because what you talked about today with the trust, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Reversible? No.
Revocable. It is reversible. It's revocable. Okay, so the way I will draw a picture for people. I have like a treasure chest. All your assets are in it. The revocable living trust is open, so you can put things in, you can take things out. The irrevocable is shut. It's locked. You can't, once you put assets in, it's in there, and you can't take them out. It's irrevocable.
That sounds very legal.
It's
you can't take it out.
You can't take it out. It's in there. It's in that name, and you leave it there. And you do that for a reason, because then it says that doesn't belong to you anymore, and so that's not going to be counted as an asset. However, you can have a loved one who has access, who is the trustee of that trust, who can then pay for things for you.
Right. I can see that would really help a lot of families.
It would. It's hard to get people to do that one.
I would imagine, because it sounds so serious.
It does. And not only that, you need to, the Medicaid has a 5-year look back period. And so if you haven't done it in 5 years, you're still going to have some issues getting qualified right away. You'll get qualified eventually, but depending on the situation. And I don't want to go into all that because it's very, very technical. And
right.
Right.
Well, I like how you kept everything very, you kept it very reasonable for us to understand, because I know that you went to school for a long time to learn all the stuff that you have. And I'm sure it's an ongoing process, because our laws do change, as we know. We just had a major law change, and it's like, what? Man, I wish I was a lawyer so I could figure that out. How'd they do that? But yeah, things can change, and quickly. And so I want people to know that scrolling across the screen right now is a phone number, 281-712-7350. I want you to write that down. I want you to keep it safe, because things change so fast. I mean, if somebody falls and breaks a hip, like my friend did, gee whiz, we need to call and find out what's going on. Where's her will? Is she going to, make it? There's so many different things that are floating around in my head right now. I needed a place to call to find out what are our options.
I have one more story I want to share that may give people a little insight on why they need to have a will or something.
Oh, good.
I got a phone call from a woman who was very, very frantic. Her really good friend had passed away. When she passed away, she told them she had no family. She was from France or somewhere. She said she had no family here or there. And she had amassed quite a bit of wealth. So she died in the hospital. She got sick, died in the hospital. There was no one to claim her body. The county took her body and they cremated her. And they told her they wouldn't release the body to her because she was only a friend. And if no one in her family came forward within a certain number of days, she would be buried in a pauper's grave. And so they had a house. She had a house that was free and clear. She had a lot of assets. And there was no one, absolutely no one, to take care of her estate. I don't know what has happened to her. The friends were trying to scrape up enough money to have a court intervene. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, but that is why you don't want that to happen. You just don't know what situation you might be in when you pass away. And you would want to make sure, if you don't have any family, that someone, a charity or someone, gets your assets, and that there's someone to actually help wrap up your estate, so that you don't wind up in that situation or in a pauper's grave somewhere and no one knows where you are.
Wow.
Really important.
That's yeah, okay, thank you. Whew. I want to
Yeah.
thank everyone for joining us today. This was been very enlightening. I feel like it's a really tough conversation to have, but it needs to happen. And so that phone number that is scrolling across the screen right now really does need to go right now. 281-712-7354. You can talk to Caroline or Joycelyn, and they are going to help you do the right thing for you, your family, your friends, whoever it is that you're concerned about. Thank you for joining us today. Joycelyn, it's been wonderful. You are just a delight.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and we'll have her back again, so make sure you let us know what your questions are. Bye for now.